third episode of Point of View Uncensored. Again, my name is Dr. Renaissance, educator and activist, and I let my guest hosts introduce themselves.
Hello, my name's Jake Glazier, otherwise known as Dr. Jake. I'm a psychologist, a professor. Right now I'm teaching classes that range from abnormal psychology, social psychology, mind and body psychology, as well as intro to psychology.
Hey everybody, I go by DJ, DJ the Great, historian, truther, naturalist, and HBCU alumni.
I'll let Mr. Cer'Princeton go next, and then Antonio can introduce himself.
Hey guys, my name is Cer'Princeton Harden. I am a teacher at the Ron Clark Academy. I've been teaching for going on 13 years. I'm new to the city of Atlanta, been here about 2 years, and I teach 4th and 5th grade science.
My name is Antonio Lewis. I'm a candidate for Atlanta City Council District 12. I actually am a communications coordinator for AFSCME, the entire southern region, everything from Florida to Texas. Anything that you see union-wise that come out, I see it or I touch it at least once. I also run a nonprofit organization called Organized to Mobilize. We are the premier organization in the country fighting to help HBCUs get land grant funding. You all might have seen Tennessee State University get about $454 million a few months ago. Our hands were all over that. I also run a creative space in Atlanta that is similar to a recreation center called O2M Strategies, where we actually have students, young mobilizers, and they do different things in Atlanta. We were able to do a college tour. We were able to take 12 students from Atlanta to 3 different states, to 6 different universities, 3 HBCUs and 3 PWIs this year. And so I do a lot of things in Atlanta. We're very busy, but happy to be here tonight with you all.
Glad to have you all here today. Great pleasure. So the first topic we want to discuss is critical race theory. And I'll let Dr. Jake give a brief introduction on what it is, and then we're going to all expound on that.
Sure. So critical race theory, historically, I believe, has come out of legal studies or studying the law. So one of the founders of critical race theory is Kimberly Crenshaw. She has a key concept in her work. It's called intersectionality. Intersectionality looks at the way that systems and institutions oppress people of certain minorities or certain people that have been disenfranchised, and it helps us understand the ways that our identities, whether it being black or white, gay or straight, male or female, and so on and so forth, the way that those put us at a disadvantage to begin with. Of course, it goes back further, which we could trace it all the way back to Marxism. Karl Marx, perhaps, inaugurated the first critique of capitalism, Adam Smith's capitalism, looking at the way that certain kinds of economies, again, back then, the distinction between capitalism and socialism. Of course, right now, we're stuck with capitalism. But the way that different economies commodify people, turn them into objects, make them units of exchange on the marketplace. Going forward in time, we can look at different French theorists in the post-structuralist school, Michel Foucault, Jacques Lacan, Deleuze, and Guattari. These are all kind of famous French theorists that again pick up on this Marxist strand, building on Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis, which is critical in nature, and specifically at the level of the psyche. What defense mechanisms are we using to engage with people? How can we reflect on those? But the French theorists really take this and build it. It goes by a different name than what is the fad that the far right is trying to push, which is critical race theory, a talking point of the far right. But it eventually evolves into what we hear on the news today, which is critical race theory. I think it's a mistake. Of course, I'm curious to hear everybody else's thoughts on this on the panel. But the sounding board that the Republicans use is that critical race theory espouses that the United States is fundamentally racist. Right? That's what you hear on the news. That's what the Republicans say. Of course, while that might be true in a certain sense, that's not the main teaching of critical race theory. Critical race theory looks at the systematic way that, again, historically, people of color, people from different geographic regions around the world, the way that they are through institutions and systems and economies and other forms of structure, the way that they're oppressed. So it's a nuanced approach, in that it takes careful thought to really look at the way these intersect, to again talk about intersectionality. So just to say this blanket statement, that we hear Governor Kemp get in front of a news camera and say, that the CRT says that the United States is fundamentally a racist country. I think that does a really poor job of conveying a message that critical race theory tries to convey, and that's one of careful thought, of analysis, and of practical action, of dismantling these institutional structures, right? Going out in the world and actually educating, raising awareness. So it's an unfortunate fact that it's become this kind of watered down version of what it used to be, at least in the media.
Good. And then we can segue into going deep into it. So a lot of times people talk about critical race theory. The first thing that come up is cancel culture. And so I want each of us to elaborate on the critical race theory, more importantly, cancel culture, and why do people use cancel culture with this new wave of things that's happening right now in our country. I'll let DJ, you go first. Give your
as far as cancel culture, or is
the whole thing in critical race theory. Pretty much, what is your take on why are people talking about it now? What's the significance of it?
For me, when I hear things that are at the forefront of like media, the first thing that comes to mind is who is the initiator and what benefit does this new talking point have? You can't help but to feel sometimes that there's a lot of race baiting that does go on in this country, especially when we hit key points for times of change, whether it be like election cycles or after certain unfortunate events. As far as how I feel about it, I feel like the questions that need to be asked are, if based off the past, the country decides to not go forward with critical race theory, how does the black community respond to that? Is it just something that is going to satisfy another aspect of us voting something in or feeling a part of a system, or will it die and there be no initiative from within? So even if schools decide, hey, this is something that we don't think is necessary for a part of our curriculum, how involved will we be in continuing to share these stories of our history with future generations?
And I'll let Cer'Princeton answer that. So what do you think, you being an educator, do you think there's something we can do eventually is teach this type of curriculum in our schools?
When you talk about critical race theory, right? So I'm gonna be very honest. Probably about till a month ago, I've never heard of critical race theory or CRT a day in my life. And then it turned into, you must know everything about this. And I'm gonna kind of branch this towards your council culture piece. So what I see a lot of times is that if somebody doesn't know something, a lot about information, they choose not to say anything on it. That's when that council culture starts to become real prominent. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read the definition. So I went to thoughtco.com, right? And so it says critical race theory is a school of thought meant to emphasize the effects of race on one's social standing. So when I look at that very basic definition, it tells me that they're teaching about how minorities or how BIPOC people have been marginalized systemically, just like Dr. Jake mentioned earlier. So how do I teach this in class? That's the question. So before critical race theory came up, we had culturally relevant teaching. So I find it very interesting how the government is trying to purposely say, hey, you cannot teach about CRT in your classroom. But the question is why? So I also did some looking on, and I looked at PragerU.com, and from their definition, they did exactly what Dr. Jake said. They said this means that America is fundamentally racist. Well, it kind of is. I mean, now that's something that us as Black people, we see, we know, we've experienced this. We've talked about all of these things, all the racism that we have coming our way. So you telling us that America is fundamentally racist, that's the talk that we have with our children. We talk about these things. We teach our kids these things at home. So now that the right is saying, oh, well, we can't say that America is racist, we've been saying it. Now you're just now hearing us because now it's become the thing. So CRT, there is a lot of information that needs to be taught to educators. CRT is not in the educators curriculum. So most of our new teachers probably haven't heard of it until now. So until we start putting these things in place to teach our teachers and then show them how to properly and effectively use it in your classroom to where you're not leaning left or right, but you're being objective with it and you're teaching the facts, then yes, it can be taught in class, but it needs to be factual. It doesn't need to be opinion based. It doesn't need to be per your perspective. It needs to be what are the facts. And I'm sorry, systemically the facts line up, and there is a need for our children, both white, Black, and anyone, to understand that these things they're realistic things that unfortunately happen. But if you say that and they don't like you, they'll counsel you right off the top of the bat, or if you dispute it, they'll counsel you as well.
Well, Antonio, what do you think about even when he just said canceling people out? Because I know in different aspects they always talk about cancel, like they cancel, they cancel Roseanne Barr from her show when she started talking about racist, making racist comments, or even with the state representative Park Cannon, how she pretty much got canceled, got arrested for knocking on the governor's door, and things of that nature when they cancel shows, and just like they cancel Bill Cosby and cancel R. Kelly and things of that nature. How does all that tie in to this critical race theory and this cancel culture, and even it being taught in education? What do you think about that?
So you mean like critical race theory being canceled?
Well, I mean, because they kind of go hand in hand. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And just looking at here in Georgia, I'm gonna try to relate it to cancel culture. I don't know how to relate it yet, but if we're saying that how Georgia is trying to counsel it, is how Georgia is trying to no longer teach about race in school. I think, and you also asked earlier about how Black people should respond to it as well. I think I want to hit both of those. Yeah. So when we think about like not trying to teach racism in school, it is systematic. If you just look at America as a whole, how we started, we're the first country that actually said slavery will be based off race. Before America existed, slavery was not based off race. It was anybody could be a slave, right? And so if they no longer want us to teach that in school, but it's a true thing. So when I looked up critical race theory, I saw how I tried to look up the opinion of the Republican and the opinion, and I was thinking about my opinion as well. And so the opinion of the Republican is that they believe that racism is a product of an intentionally bad individual. They don't think it's the system. They think, nah, it's that person. They don't want it to be taught that it's the system. reason why people on third base, they want you to think they hit a triple. They don't want you to know they were born on third base. But I don't know how to relate it as much to council culture.
Yeah, that was a bit challenging. I think that they kind of intertwined it, that you made it a little harder to answer.
But I think people need to be held accountable, for their actions. So if, like you use the example of Bill Cosby or R. Kelly, should their careers just be canceled because of what they did? I think there needs to be some kind of accountability.
But if you think about, look at the guy off Seventh Heaven, like he supposedly molested children, and they still show Seventh Heaven on TV.
So, with using those two examples, if you're talking about entertainment, where you're saying, here are these two black guys and they did this one thing or whatever they were doing, and here's the counterpart, this white guy, and he did something just as bad, and these black guys got canceled, and this guy's still around, and the show's still going, and why is that so? And then it's like the comparison with education. Well, we can talk about Rome conquering and Alexander and all of these sort of things, but we can't talk about this segment of history that deals with these people. And what I was saying earlier was, if it doesn't happen, then what? I feel like sometimes we make a comparison with the want of inclusion in a space where it's been shown you're not included. And instead of taking that as an opportunity to do for self, it's like we're begging to sit at a table. So it's like, okay, if you create culture, meaning what made Bill Cosby Bill Cosby? Was it writers? Was it his charisma? Was it R. Kelly's genius ability? Whatever the case may be. If you are the viewing, buying power, can you really be canceled? Same thing with or sharing your experience or your history. If it's not taught, but it is you, can you still be written out of history? So,
and I guess you can answer that, and so if that makes better sense as far as, can we teach it in education, or how can we bring this curriculum into our education?
I was thinking, in my mind, I just thought about how I can relate critical race theory to cancel culture. Because if we teach it, we have to cancel George Washington, right? Because we'll have to talk about how, or we'll have to cancel Thomas Jefferson, because we'll talk about how his slave created macaroni and cheese. Because that means he had a slave. As a president, he had a slave, you know what I mean? Or if we teach the real history of the country, we have to get rid of some monuments, right? That's the best way I can probably relate it.
That's good. I was thinking even some things, like even the governor, I forgot the governor, he was the vice president of the Confederacy, but he ended up becoming the governor of Georgia. I forgot his name. I know Jefferson Davis was the president. Whoever the vice president was, I gotta look it up. But they show his monument. It's at the Georgia State Capitol now, and he was part of the Confederacy, and then he ended up becoming the governor. And now they have a statue. You pretty much have a statue of a person who's going against America inside our Georgia State Capitol. So
Joseph Brown.
But that's because the history was written by the losers. So we live in America. America is the only country in the world that glorified losers. The Confederacy. Think about this right here. On January 6th, right? We all saw what happened in D.C. They flew a Confederate flag while saying USA. That lets you know, like, you're on the wrong team, buddy. You know what I mean? My university was built by military men. It's the only university in the world built by colored infantrymen, right? They put all their money together for 2 years. They were making 10 cents a year, 10 cents a piece at times. And they put together their money for 2 years to start their institution. The school right up the street was started by Confederate men, Confederate soldiers. As a matter of fact, their university was used as a Confederate camp, Confederate holding camp during the Civil War. the state of Missouri held all of their funding because they were using their money to fund the war against the United States of America. After the war, the United States gave money to that university while withholding money from my university. So if we don't teach CRT, we won't know that, because I would never been taught that, hey, the state got to choose winners and losers versus HBCUs and Confederate, camps like University of Georgia, for example.
And I'm sorry, the name was Alexander Hamilton Stevens. That was his name. The guy that was the vice president of the Confederacy, that became the governor of Georgia. Sir Prince, I believe you were saying something, correct? Were you about to say something?
Yeah and no. I kind of feel like exactly what Ms. Lewis was just talking about, as far as to teach CRT or to take on the theory, because I don't know if there's actually a curriculum, exactly for it, more than just a mode of making sure that you are telling the entire story, right? Because a lot of days you get segments in these books and they leave parts of it out. So the CRT portion, I feel, would be make sure that you go and you do a little bit more research and you find out the backstory of what's actually going on, so you can find out that how the blacks were disenfranchised in this movement. So, but like he said earlier, that is going to require you to, quote unquote, counsel somebody. But counseling only happens when the media gets attached to it, because they only allow certain stories to get out. So Stephen Collins came and went. R. Kelly came and he stayed. R. Kelly has been a meme. He's a GIF. He's all over. You can press R. Kelly GIF in your phone right now, and you'll have almost 100 pictures pop up. Same thing with Bill Cosby. They plaster what they want to plaster. And you can say that's systemic. You can say that is by chance. But those are black men.
If you're a little hard on black men,
right? And so is that what we're talking about with CRT and the fact that Stephen Collins and they're still showing Seventh Heaven, on certain series, and the Cosby Show? Are they showing the Cosby Show now?
No.
I don't think that they are. It's like they kind of. I know they took it off before. I think they might have snuck it back on TV Land or something, but not how it used to be. And I know they took his star too. They took his star from Hollywood.
Dare those black men try to achieve more, and they did that too. So we got to counsel them. We got to treat them that way. That's how our black community. That's how we treat them. We made sure we got them up out of here.
And think
other cultures do that.
Bill Cosby is all our childhood, right? Especially if you didn't have a dad in the house.
I'm gonna tell you something. As a married man, if he did what they said he did, as a married man with nieces, I'm not for anything like that.
Right. So
let me let Jake go. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We have to remember what they've been either accused of or found guilty of, right? So I don't know if their race excuses them for those acts, or I don't think it does. But of course, race factors into the conversation.
They don't. They bury it. It's not that it's whether they're accused. It's the stories get buried. Like, as soon as Stephen Collins came out, everybody else's story trampled over the media. Think about the algorithms that you get on your social media. If they really don't want you talking about Stephen Collins, America's greatest white dad, then they're not going to put him in that formula. But if Bill Cosby does something the next week or 2 weeks later,
how dare he?
How dare he?
How dare he?
Boom, 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 boom. You attacked two of the most prominent black men in our community. We love R. Kelly. I'm talking about 12 Play took me all the way from high school, all the way through college and some. Bill Cosby I had a dad in the household, but I was like, I wish my dad was more like Bill Cosby. Dad, wear these Bill Cosby sweaters. They took them away because why? One, they did some stuff that was real messed up. Let's say that. It was real bad. I can never excuse what they did. But I will say that those algorithms put them more in the spotlight, so to where they are counseled a lot more quicker than Stephen.
I think a good way to frame the discussion is through what you guys I've heard a couple of times called story or narrative. And so who gets to tell the story, who gets to tell the grand narrative of what's going on or what history was. And of course, that factors into present day media, right? With the stories that are reported on, that are not reported on, that are forgotten, Or even going back to the example that Paul brought up of the Confederate statues, the historical concrete monuments that, are erected. So I think,
The Civil War, like, most erected up to 30 to 40 years after the Civil War by the losers.
Are we talking about two separate things? Just for clarity, when I hear cancel culture, and then I hear the media narrative, I associate them as two different things. When I think cancel culture, the first thing that comes to mind would be an example like Black Twitter, which is aside from the media, like the media or network television. Well, and what I mean, the difference is network television, meaning I can remove you from platforms, I can cancel your shows, I can make sure that you can't receive publishing or
Some folks are making more money off. Well, for example, right? Cancel culture and algorithms. TikTok right now is having the black talent for the black dancer basically doing everything for TikTok. They went on strike, and TikTok has lost money. The dances haven't been right since, right? And that's media. TikTok is, and the reason why they went on strike is basically because TikTok would, let's say if I create a dance, I could create the dance, I do it better. They wouldn't even mean my dance. They would make sure that my dance isn't highlighted. They would highlight my brother, who's also a part of the podcast,
Dr. Jake.
They'll highlight yours instead of mine, even though I created it, to make sure he makes more money than me, and he would be the person that trends. And that's why the black folk went on strike right now.
And that's kind of putting everything that you're talking about into one little bubble. That's the CRT. So that's the systemic oppression of black people based off of their race, and then the cancel culture. So black dancers are now trying to do their best to make a statement for themselves by saying, okay, we're not going to create any more dances, because if we don't create them, they can't copy it. They can't colonize our dances and make all the money off of it. So media, social media, Twitter, TikTok, that's where most people get most of their information. Network TV, I haven't watched ABC in forever. I'll watch CNN.
YouTube TV.
Once again, it's that social media. Social media is so big right now. There's so many opportunities for you to find information. You can also find a lot of wrong information. But if you do your research, it's going to start with your social media and those algorithms that people look at. TikTok can give you a lot of information in 60 seconds. And that's what all those TikTokers are trying to do. They're trying to give you as much information in 60 seconds as they possibly can. And whichever one the system decides to put out more, that's what people are going to see. That's who's going to get canceled.
I think the best way that we can sum it up is cancel culture is a people and media is the system. So within the system of media, the people have the ability to cancel. How do we apply that to critical race theory? Meaning, if the system decides not to include, what do the people do to cancel these actions? Meaning, okay, it's not being taught. Do we cancel America? Do we cancel the school system? Do we the two kind of balance each other in a way. But one can't do without the other. If the people do not show up, then social media, like you were saying, when the dancers stopped dancing, TikTok went dry. There was nothing new, there was no salt there. So we're not doing critical race theory. How do we as a people decide, are the black teachers going to cancel school? Are the black parents going to cancel school? Or do we just go on with it, like roll over and continue to let the system do what it does?
Yeah, and I think critical race theory it's a thought process, almost like implicit bias, right? Yeah. So a lot of people we have these implicit biases about certain people, and you can say that those implicit bias comes from is a stem off of critical race theory, because it's what you're exposed to, is what you see. So critical race theory isn't necessarily, I don't see it, and I could be wrong. I'm wrong a lot, so it's fine. But I don't see critical race theory as being its own separate entity from uh, social media. I see it as something that's intertwined. The word that the hot term for that would be intersectionality. There are all these, they intersect together and they all weave together to create this one purpose, which is the oppression of BIPOC people.
I think we can all agree, or maybe in different ways, that the United States or America is founded on racist systems, and some of those systems, many of those systems, still haunt us today.
I mean, and so that's actually a good segue to go into. I know we were talking about the 1619 project, which is a new project written by I think Nicole Harris Jones. Let me make sure I'm saying the right name. Yes, Nicole Hannah. I'm sorry, Nicole Hannah Jones. So she created this 1619 project, which pretty much gives a brief, like a good history about how slavery started in America, and they want to implement those into the schools. But there's a lot of pushback with her doing that. So I want to know, what do you guys think about us pushing it into the schools? Do you think it's necessary? Do you think it's going to happen, or do you think it's just going to be a never ending battle?
Interesting you talk about 1619 project. I've been one of my mentors. He's been a part of it since they started it. So he's been feeding me this stuff about what was coming. And as you notice, I work on stuff from 1890 up. And so anything you want to think about systematic in America, you got to go back to when they was writing this stuff. But you also know they wrote down a lot of the stuff that they also wrote, like what they were saying. You know how we're having like a meeting right now? These folks were so smart and so intense. They even wrote what people were saying during the meeting, so you can hear the dialogue around creating stuff, right? And so, the 1619 project should definitely come into school. And if it's being taught by New York Times, the New York Times is the paper of record for the United States of America. So no matter what happens, like that's the paper that if 100 years from now, whatever's in the New York Times is what was done on that day, because that's the paper of record. So we good either way it goes on my end on that New York Times piece.
As long as, like he said, as long as it remains factual. I mean, as long as you keep the facts straight. So yeah, it's something that definitely needs to be implemented. For one, it sheds some light on a couple of things, but that light that is shedding is offensive to some people, right? You turn on the light in the room, if your eyes are closed, and you were used to being in the dark and the lights come on, what are you going to do? You're going to close your eyes. You're going to resist that change. So it's a lot of truth that's going to come out of this story, and it does make people view America very differently. But facts are facts, and people try to run away from them.
And DJ, I know you were saying, as far as we need to be the one, pretty much, I was getting that you want us to teach our own history instead of looking for validation or asking for permission. Ask for permission to teach our own history. So what's the best way to go about, even with this 1619 project, which was invented by an African American woman, and how should we go about teaching that, bringing it into the schools, or if we're not able to bring it to the schools, what other alternatives do you think we should do?
We have a great history of oral tradition of passing down history. I think that goes back to a time period where we were more connected as a community and as a culture, and more sense of pride based off of our connection with our ancestors. I think that the best way for us to go forward would be to use our natural ability to make things interesting. The same way we choose at this point in time to make clothing decisions popular, or who's the next hottest this, or a dance, or things like that. I think we have to get back to the root of cultural pride, and to make it a popular thing about knowing the painful past that you're from. So even with yes, sir.
I think I disagree with saying not write it, right? Our oral history has gotten us in this place. I was thinking about like when you sit in the classroom and you tell one person one thing and you pass it around the class, and by the end it's a whole different a word that you've said, right? That happens all the time. What we just did at Tennessee State University, we've done three decades of 3 generations have had to make that same fight because it wasn't written, right? For example, the at Tennessee State University, we just helped the Black university sue the state of Missouri, sue the state of Tennessee, and get over $454 million of old money since 1890, right? The reason why the state of Tennessee was able to withhold the money, and why we had 3 generations of Black folk fighting this fight, like literally fighting this fight since the 70s, is because the person who was writing stuff, they weren't writing it. So they were all like word of mouth. And so we were able to get it because the state rep went back and did some detailed notes based on Tennessee Knoxville's money. And he saw what years Tennessee State did not get money. We were able to calculate the funding based off that. But we had to, and the only reason, and another reason why we're able to get the $454 million is because now it's in the paper of record for the Tennessee's. I mean, now it's in the State House paper of record. So now they admitted that we had to get the state to admit that they systematically did not put money in Tennessee State's funding, but we had to write it. So we had not written that, well, the next generation to be fighting it.
Let me clarify what I meant by that. We have to definitely put things in writing, but there are areas that we are afraid to speak of because of thinking of past trauma. That's what I mean by oral tradition. If it's not kept relevant, meaning we have to continue to speak and talk and deal with these things, then it'll be forgotten. So if we're living in today, still dealing with the pains of 30 years ago, because we're pushing it to the side, whether it's I don't want to address it or see these sort of things anymore or read certain things about these past events, then we're bound to forget it.
Well, Jake, what do you think about all this? I know coming from your perspective, is this something you can see the European culture wanting to implement in our in this new culture in America?
Well, I agree with D. I mean, the oral history I think is really important in terms of passing down stories, passing down lessons, passing down different histories, and of course, that the technology of writing or being literate, was denied to Black people in the United States for so long, and so that they go hand in hand. And so what I'm trying to say is, I think my guess, right, my sense is that there'd be a lot of rich Black oral history and stories, and we know. From narratology or psychology, that stories shape worlds, language shapes identities. And so being able to have a space to tell these stories in the media, creating that space, which is now predominated mostly by white people who crowd out those Black stories, I think could be really transformative. And I think you guys have mentioned, social media is a great way to get out of, quote unquote, mainstream media, right? That seems to be racist in a lot of ways. But social media, alternative forms of media, I think being creative can be really powerful. And the younger generation is really good at that, thinking outside of the box. How can we do things differently? But I do really strongly feel that stories and narratives and being able to tell these things can transform people's lives and change the course of history.
Right.
You just said about with the social media aspect, and I'm just going to kind of hop back on that algorithm word one more time, because there are stories that I could put out, or some stories somebody else can put out, a white guy can put out, for example. I'll never see it on my social media. It could even be helpful. It could be helpful things, but depending on what I've already viewed, that's going to tell Twitter what to feed me. What's on TikTok? They have the For You page, or FYP. What comes up on my For You page? And if I'm a racist, I'm only going to receive more racist stuff, or more things that support my vision or my beliefs. I saw this a lot during the last election right here that we had with Trump and Biden. I would see Trump will have some commercials that will pop up on. I saw somebody's YouTube channel, and I've never really saw a Trump campaign unless I went to go look for it. But on somebody else's, I saw the Trump and everything they were saying. I was like, oh God, that's why they think this way, because these are the stories that they're seeing. I would never see that story. The story that I get fed from our algorithm is going to be something totally different. So it goes back to that system. What systems are going to be in place, or what systems can we change, even with social media, that allows for the stories to actually break free and get out? Go ahead, Antonio. My bad.
Yeah. So I think stories can be lies. So I had to look up what story meant, right? And the definition of story is exactly what it's an account of imagery of real people, of events told for entertainment, right? An account of, so I just wanted to make sure we got there, right? Then I wanted to go into like my points right after that. What is a Black person's oral history? We don't even know it, because the stories got lost, right? Because if stories are real, why we don't know the stories from Africa? Why we don't know what white man raped our grandma? We should know the exact right man, because the story got told to somebody, right? Right. Then if we had, think about, do everybody on this call know who the first person that died for America was to create the country?
I have
a story, huh?
I have no clue.
There's a Black man. See, the story ain't been told. The first person to die for the American Revolution was a Black man. That story ain't been told. So if you don't write it and you don't tell it, what a story can be anything. So stories get lost. And for one more thing, have you all ever had yams before?
Oh yeah,
come on. Had yams? All y'all say y'all had yams? You been to Africa? Where'd you get yams at? You had candy yams at your grandma's house? Mm-hmm. That's a story that got told, right? Them ain't yams. So a story got told us that the yams that we eat for Thanksgiving is yams, but them ain't yams. We can't make yams in America. Those are sweet. What are they, babe?
Sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes. You know what I mean? But we've been told our whole life that lie, that those are yams. You know what I'm saying? So once again, when America was written, they wrote down you think Native Americans who owned Osage, who owned the Osage people who owned the University of Missouri, the story that they were told when they thought they were loaning them land, they thought they were sharing land with them. The story they were told was they can hunt and fish on the land forever. But what was written was you can hunt and fish for 11 years. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So you got to write this stuff down, man. Whatever y'all doing, if y'all talk to some kids, make sure y'all tell them write it down. We ain't listening to no stories. We want it black and white. That's why I'm buying property and pulling up farms and having and putting up stuff out in the hood, man. Because we want it in black and white. You can come see what I got. It ain't no stories.
And that right there is your CRT, because you are trying to, once again, stop this franchise. Just showing the evidence, just showing the facts, and it's so relevant, it's so important.
But if I didn't know my brother tonight, I'd never jump on this call. And so these stories never get told.
I know DJ wanted to say something.
No, I mean, I definitely understand your point. Definitely things have to be put in stone, in writing. You don't want to get... I think the disconnect is, I'm not saying to not scribe our history down, but this, going back to what we were saying earlier, you can learn more from a 60-second TikTok or from a 15-minute YouTube video, I could, learn this vast amount of information in a short period of time through audio and video than traditional reading. So let's not write and keep track and put things in writing and fall for the soothsayer's words, but definitely the conversation like we're having now has to continue to be had amongst generations in order to remember so that we can progress, is what I mean.
That could be a great way to segue onto our last topic for this episode, which is, since we're talking about history, like right now, history in the making right now, as far as the January 6th insurrection, since we were talking about the whole 2020 election, that which was caused that January 6th insurrection. But what do you think moving into the future? Do you think that story is going to be told differently than what we know as it is happening now?
It's already been told different, right? So we all saw something. And if you look at what's been coming out of the house, they don't even want to investigate it. So the story's already being told different from what happened January 6th. It went from a riot. They're not even talking about the person that got killed. They're not talking about those were traitors. If you want to know what our country really was standing on, like everyone who entered the Capitol building should have died that day. That's the way our country was built. They were a traitor. They carried a flag of a defeated enemy of our country in our state capitol and walked out alive. And they killed some of the people protecting our country. And I'm a strong American. I know I'm more American than anybody who walked in that capitol. No one should have been able to walk out of that capitol. That's the way our country was built.
And just to be clear, I think it was 6 people that died in the insurrection. I think it was 1 or 2 police officers or Capitol police officers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, people did die.
The way our country is written, the way our country is written, reach out to anybody who's been around. Anybody that's a traitor to our country, and if they go enter our building, that was an act of war. Everyone who entered that building should have died. That's the country we live in.
Well, I can't imagine what if it was a mob of black people that tried to storm the Capitol, how that would have been different.
Have you seen Have you seen what a mob of police have done to a group of black people in Tulsa? You seen what they did in Atlanta? Yeah, we know if a mob of black people never would have tried that, by the way, because we know the consequences of it. We never tried to enter. I'm here in Atlanta. I led the protest here in Atlanta. We never tried to enter the police station. We saw what they did in Seattle. People from Seattle flew down to Atlanta. They tried to get us to enter the police station. The black people, we stayed back. We wanted no parts of that.
I feel like ultimately we're getting back to the same point, whether it be, I feel like the common thought is that America respects and takes care of America, and black people feel American, but America has shown you that you are not so, including you in the history. So if they don't want you to touch race subjects, and I don't mean to backpedal into the last topic, but if they don't want you to touch certain race topics in school, then what does history look like? If the curriculum going forward, let's just talk about, roses, and you really weren't picking cotton because of this. You were like an indentured slave. You were an indentured servant. Yeah, they were technically terrorists and traitors to the country. Or, yeah, he might have been hostile to the police, and then you flip it to the other side with black people in our experience in America, it's the opposite. So at what point do we just take things at face value and notice, to you, I'm still treated like an enemy? And why?
I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
I thought he was about to say something. And why are we not making the in-game adjustments to what you have been experiencing that's been going on for our generation, the previous generation, as far back as we can think? And at what point does the alarm go off in your head and say, these things don't work for me, but we continue to try these things, at what point do we pivot into a new area to get new results? Whether it be, because it dawns to me that this is pushing you in the direction of for self, teach for self, police for self, legislate and create your own code for self. And then if that leads to canceling, are you prepared to step up in place of, because as one if you start to take away the foundation of capitalism, what's at the bottom is what's left. So do we build from there? And is America telling you that indirectly what you're asking for is to give you the power that I don't want to give you? Because when you look at it historically, no two people can rule at the same time. As much as we would like to sit and say, oh, someone has to be here and someone has to allow the transition to happen. So until we start to think and realize the position that you're asking for, and if the power havers are willing to give that up, then we're going to be running in a circle.
Go ahead, Cer'Princeton, you can go.
No, go ahead, Mr. Lewis. I saw you piping up.
Oh no.
1 second.
Well, you can go. You've been waiting, so I'll let you go first.
So America as a thought process, right? Or America as the vision of America. What is America is kind of what I was hearing while DJ was talking. And so it made me think that nobody wants to think that America is a bad place. I don't think America is a bad place. I don't think it is. Do we have things that we need to fix? Of course. But the thing that scares people is when they hear they're wrong. No one likes to hear that they're wrong. Think about you in a relationship. The thing that your wife or spouse or whoever, your husband, whoever says is wrong, that's the hardest thing for you to hear. And that's what they're trying to resist. That's what's being resisted. It's not the fact that these things didn't happen. They don't want to hear about it. They have the power to stop us from hearing about it. What we are doing is we're trying to find a way to still get that information and get those facts taught. So to go back to what you were talking about with being creative, and then go back to Mr. Lewis's point, which is writing down. Both of those forms are forms of documentation. So they both need to be done. I think there's a quote that says the quickest way to hide something from a black person is to put it in a book. I don't know if I'm the only person that's ever heard that, but to me, it didn't hit me until later in life when I was like, what does that mean? You can write down things, but people aren't going to read it. So until people actually, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the black community. I'm talking about each individual person, black, white, Hispanic, Latinx, all those, until the people decide that, hey, I'm going to pick something up and I'm going to look for that information, until they have the desire to do it, is not going to be done. So we can't just sit here and spin our wheels, but we have to find ways to get people to get interested in the information. It all can't be depressing. It all can't be written. It all can't be something that's looked at as superficial or not taken seriously. So everybody staying in their lane and pushing the information out in those different directions, as long as it's the same vision that's being taught, which is let's address the issues, let's address these elephants in the room. Why are these white people able to storm the Capitol, but we can't protest peacefully in the street without being attacked or arrested or made to be, or called thugs, or have all these other people from the sidelines coming in and starting to destroy buildings and then blaming it on us? Why are these stories not being told? Why are the stories that actually tell the facts, why are they being hidden? Why is it every time something about CRT is posted on Instagram, the story is buried underneath everything else? So it's a matter of people being able to face when they're wrong. And if white America and I'm not saying every white person, because I know, but if the majority or those with power aren't willing to accept the responsibility and willing to step up and let those stories be told, it's never going to get told.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think too, to reiterate your point, that it requires a lot of inner self-reflective and psychological work to see the ways that someone is privileged or not privileged, or discriminated against or not discriminated against. And to be frank, most privileged people in privileged positions don't really want to do that work. Why bother? I come from a small town in Illinois. There were 2 black people that lived in that town out of 6,000. Why bother doing that work? It doesn't impact my daily life. So it's laziness, I think. It's poor education, to get back to the CRT. I think we need an educational system that teaches skills and tools and interventive strategies that can help students think about their contextual place in the world. So we're not all just isolated individuals. We didn't just come from nothing, right? Everybody has a heritage, everybody has a history. And in the United States, that heritage and that history has been predominantly through and through racist. That's just a fact, right? White people in particular, don't want to hear that. Because you get the argument that I just heard on the news today that regarding reparations. Mitch McConnell gets in front of the Senate and says he thinks reparations are a bad idea because he doesn't think that he should be held accountable for what his ancestors did, generations ago. That argument, or that position rather, is not really even an argument, right? It's just a claim. That claim in itself decontextualizes the whole situation, right? Well, I was just born. I just came out of nothing. Well, in fact, you exist in a genealogy. Your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, or even your grandparents, because Mitch McConnell is probably 200 at this point, probably owned slaves. Right. So, to make the point again, it requires a careful level of thought, of self-reflection, and personal inner work that most people don't want to do. I shouldn't say we, but minorities, gay individuals, black individuals, women, we all have to do that work part of the time. Because of our position in society. We have to. A straight, white, heterosexual man doesn't have to if he doesn't want to. I think there's something to be said for having CRT and helping students, this next generation, become more informed about these kinds of systemic forms of discrimination.
And we're gonna conclude with this episode, because I know we're gonna talk about our next episode, toxic masculinity. I know we're gonna talk about that soon, so we're gonna end this off for right now.
Can I give 2 books real quick that I'm going to read for CRT? And that's because, like I say, I'm really new to it, right? So I don't want to give a whole bunch. So I'm just going off of the things that I've read. But 2 books that I'm interested in reading, and if anybody wants to read those and talk about it, please feel free. The first one is They Came Before Columbus. That's by Ivan Van Sertima. All right. And then also Racism Without Racist. And that's by Bonilla Silva. So those are 2 books that, for those of you like me who need to know more about this CRT and kind of get a better understanding of it, please reach out to those books. Tell me your thoughts. You can find me on Instagram at Sir Harden, CerHarden.
Okay.
Can I just say one quote that constantly kept coming to mind? Malcolm X: "Only a fool will let his enemy teach his children," and I think that we should keep that in mind. The fact that we have to ask for these things to be added into areas of study, especially when we're going into our community, shows the lack of power that we have in reality.
Okay. Tony, any lasting comments?
Just say one more thing on stories get lost. I know, Cer'Princeton, I know you said that you want to have something from a Black person put it in the book. You know how that story really was said, right? And you know it also won a story that's a true thing. They literally hid stuff from us by putting it in a book. You know what I'm saying? And that was written down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we have the most literate Black society. We have the most literate society in the history of the planet. And so we're making different decisions right now based off us knowing how to read and us knowing that this stuff is wrong, right? And so there's only so far they're going to be able to go. I appreciate being a part of this conversation again. If anybody wants to check out things I'm doing, you can follow me on all social media outlets at Antonio Lewis ATL. And my website is AntonioLewisATL.com. And if you're looking for anything else, I'm at Organized to Mobilize. So let's go.
All right, and that wraps up our episode. Episode 3 of Point of View Uncensored. Again, I am Dr. Renaissance.
I'm Dr. Jake.
I'm DJ the Great.
I'm Cer'Princeton Harden.
Antonio Lewis.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you once again. We'll see you on our next episode. Please follow us on our social networks. YouTube, have a YouTube channel called Point of View Uncensored. Please look us up there, and we'll see you on our next episode of Point of View Uncensored.